Okay, we are actually going to start, if you wouldn't mind hitting the lights real quick there. We're going to start by looking at a slideshow. This one relates to the one we had yesterday, the monarchical displays of power. No, that's fine. That's fine how it is. Thank you.
The camera went up.
That's fine. It'll be on their screen. Okay, thank you. So we're just going to watch through this one. I know it's not as big. This is the same slides we had yesterday, just reminding you about this guy's political theory. Why the conspicuous displays of grandeur are necessary. And then a crown is one of the most simple examples of a conspicuous display of grandeur. It's a really fancy hat that's showing how wealthy they are and how powerful they are. Okay, some pretty portraits of people. We'll actually take a look at this one of Louis XIV a little closer later. Palaces. Oh, yeah, question.
Wait, what's his name? The guy who came up with this?
You don't need to know his name.
Okay.
We just need to know, like, that.
The concept of why just conspicuous displays of grandeur were important. You don't even need to know his specific reasons, the concepts of why.
So just showing how they'll.
Yeah, how awesome they are, how powerful they are, because the common people couldn't figure, they didn't understand monarchy, but they could understand, like, wow, he's rich and strong. So palaces is another common way. It's a pretty cool looking one. The Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, which looks a lot like Versailles, which is really the gold standard of conspicuous displays of grandeur. Versailles is really kind of the pinnacle of it. So I want you to talk about this one with your partner. Why did gardens, how did these vast gardens demonstrate, how were these conspicuous displays of grandeur in and of themselves? Go ahead.
The gardens show how they kind of harness nature, they do what they want with it to create something really beautiful.
The shows
The church is another way. This is St. Basil's in Moscow, probably the most famous image of Moscow. All those bright colors. Royal celebrations are another way showing how many people love them and how powerful they are. The royal celebrations a lot of times have military displays also to show their power. Now, if you can combine a palace and a celebration, well, there's some good stuff. This is a very English one. Read this. They couldn't build these huge palaces because Parliament controlled the purse strings. They couldn't do whatever they wanted. And so this royal touch was something that was that they kind of kept.
So they acted like they were God?
I don't know about God, but like they had magical healing powers. Yeah. I exorcise the demon. No, that's not it. And then we looked yesterday at how monarchs' use of controlling the night was also a conspicuous display of power. Okay, next thing I want you to do is take out your French notes and your Edict of Nord sheets, s'il vous plaît. good-looking picture of Louis, isn't it? Famous portrait of Louis.
He got them leggings.
Oh, he's got some legs. He's 63 years old in this portrait, but he is still proud of his legs.
Boy got it.
And he wants people to see him. You notice the red high heels, too? He was a little short, so he made those to compensate a little bit. But, oh, he owns it. I mean, don't get me wrong. The tights, the heels, the flowing robe, striking, really.
It's like he's wearing a rug.
Well, if you notice, it matches the ottoman and the chair in the background. So with the fleur-de-lis, the royal symbol of France. But he's got a sword. He's got a scepter. He still cuts quite a striking figure, wouldn't you say? It's a wig. It's a wig. Flowing locks. I mean, if they got a fan on him, if this was like a model shoot and he got the little shake going, I mean, good stuff. All right, here's the first thing I would like you to do. I would like you to make a timeline on your own, and this timeline does not need to have any dates on it. Nope, you were just supposed to answer the questions, but I'm not there right now. I'm on something else. Okay? You're supposed to make a timeline of the decentralization and re-centralization of France. So you're actually starting in the last unit. You're starting when France dissolved. And again, you do not need any dates. But I want you to make a timeline of the decentralization and then centralization of France. On your own first, and then we'll have a chance to talk with our partner. Yep. Focusing on centralization, on decentralizing what happened, and then how it got re-centralized. Another minute to see what you can come up with. All right, share your timeline with your partner. See what you guys both came up with.
I started with St. Bartholomew's Day and decentralization and Henry IV in power creates the Edict of Nord. Then I had Cardinal Richelieu, obviously, last name, basically, through net farming, regulating economies. Did other things. Got rid of degree of revocation.
So I don't want to kill you.
And they're like fighting like a war time now.
And then kind of like ease off the so it's like I have
I go St. Barts, Henry IV, Edict of Nord, Richelieu, Louis XIV, the Fronde, Colbert, Intendants, and wars. Oh, I'm sorry, and then revocation of the Edict of Nord, and then wars. I'll run through those again, and you just let me know if any of them don't make sense to you. St. Barts, Henry IV, Edict of Nord, Richelieu, Louis XIV, the Fronde, Colbert, Intendants, revocation, and war. Yeah.
When you like talk about war, are you talking about like all Louis' war?
Which we'll focus on today.
What was the one after Colbert?
Intendants or the Fronde? I don't know which one was after.
Intendants.
Okay.
What came after the Edict of Nord?
Richelieu, I think. Okay. Before we get into the wars of Louis XIV, I think it'd be useful to talk about the Edict of Nord, which is the homework you had for last night. Who issued the Edict of Nord? Henry IV. Why? Why did he issue it? Dante, thank you. Because what was his goal? What was he trying to do with France? Centralize it. And he needed the Protestants, right? Big picture, what did Richelieu do with the Edict of Nord? Pulled it back, right? Pulled back some of the protections for the Protestants. How come?
He's Catholic.
He also sided with the Protestants during the 30 Years' War. I don't think that matters. He also had two mistresses.
He just wants to kill the Catholics. So he's trying to.
But why did he revoke the Edict of Nord?
Oh.
Jennifer, thank you.
He wanted to unify France under a single religion.
Okay, so, but I thought Henry issued the Edict of Nord to help centralize it more. So why is he not worried about that?
He didn't think that having Protestants and Catholics together, he didn't think that would work very well, and he felt like a single religion would be much better.
Thought it would be much better. What does it tell you about the strength of the monarch at this point compared to Henry IV? It's stronger, right? Because he doesn't need the Protestants as much. And then what does Louis XIV finally do with the Edict of Nord?
Completely revokes it.
Completely revokes it. What does that tell you about the strength of the monarchy now?
Very strong.
Very strong. Because don't forget who the Huguenots in France were, which our test question was. They were a lot of the nobility in the middle class, right? And Louis is essentially saying, we don't need you. See ya. Go. Au revoir. Right? Now, by the way, little side note, where a lot of these French Huguenots ended up was in Germany, because Prussia, which isn't Prussia yet, but it was a very open-minded place, and they pretty much welcomed everybody. So they got a huge influx of a lot of intellectual capacity, a lot of businessmen, a lot of lawyers, a lot of merchants, and it's one of the things that really helped grow Prussia into Prussia. because they got a whole bunch of smart French people there. Also, by the way, have you ever heard the phrase lingua franca? Any of you ever heard that? Basically means common language. What it means is that in Europe at this time, the common language was French. If you wanted to do business in Europe, you had to speak French. Whether you were German, Spanish, Italian, or English, you had to speak French. And one of the big reasons the lingua franca of France, or the lingua franca of Europe was French, is because all these French people got kicked out and had to go all kinds of different other places. So the French language spread with them. I want to take a minute and check in your homework, and I want you to talk about the Edict of Nord. So go ahead and run through the answers to those questions with your partner.
Number one, what are
And I said they mainly
For number 2, it's basically most of them concerned no religious law, how to go what's acceptable. They drove them out.
Okay, sounds like we're done. So now we need to focus some on the wars of Louis XIV. This is an important idea. And the first conversation I want you to have with your partner is, what were his goals? Louis was, until this most recent Queen of England, about 2 years ago, Louis was the longest reigning monarch in Europe. And he spent over 80% of his reign at war. Okay, he had something like 8 years of peace in his entire reign. And so war was obviously an important aspect of his foreign policy. What were his goals? What were his big picture? Don't worry about focusing in on any individual war. Your book talked about 2. I'm going to add a 3rd, but we're going to focus on one big one. Okay? What were his overall goals? That's the first conversation to have. Go ahead. With your partner. Question?
No.
Go ahead.
Well, he wanted to expand France and what he considered his natural border.
Improving the army, he had, that's part of studying, that made him much more professional.
KP, what do we say? What was Louis trying to get to? I heard you say it.
He wanted to expand France to its natural borders.
To what he called its natural borders. What does that mean? What do natural borders mean?
Like rivers and mountains, maybe?
I think you're thinking too natural. Did he want to take over all of Europe? Was he trying to conquer everywhere? What does natural borders mean, Jack?
Like land that France originally had, but was taken away from them.
Or if not, even if they never had it at some point, they felt they should have, or it belonged to them, or there was a lot of French people there. Yeah. Right, lands that were, quote-unquote, rightfully France. According to who? Louis, or France, right? So that's the natural borders idea. One other phrase that's used a lot when we talk about Louis' goals here, we say that he wanted a universal monarchy. He wanted one central control of this very large territory. And so a lot of times you'll see the phrase universal monarchy when referring to Louis. Now, your reading talked about one war. It talked about his war against Holland, in which it was France versus the Dutch, the Holy Roman Empire, and Spain. You remember that one in your reading? Okay. One that was not in your reading that I do want you to get down was the War of the League of Augsburg. War of the League of Augsburg, which went from 1688 to 97. (1688 to 97). Did I say that wrong? Okay, I thought I just said 1698 to 97. That wouldn't make sense. Pay attention. Sorry. So the War of the League, this was France versus the Holy Roman Empire, the Dutch, Spain, Sweden, and England. Holy Roman Empire, Dutch, Spain, Sweden, and England. By the way, have we figured out we need to start abbreviating countries? HRE, Dutch, SP, Swede, Ing. Right? We've gotten that down? So basically it was France against who? Everybody else. Let's see a hand on this one. What was the goal of the League of Augsburg? Dante? Three-word answer.
Balance power.
Balance of power. Very good. Balance of power. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to check the strength of France. Balance of power. Now, wait a second. I just got to make sure we're clear on this. Does balance of power mean the Dutch are equally as strong as France?
No.
Does that mean if France went to war with Sweden, it would be equal? What does balance of power mean then? What is that concept? What does that mean? Sinead?
All the time we're like checking just France, so that doesn't mean that they're equal, just means that France doesn't get as powerful as it could if no one checked
France isn't more powerful than who?
all of that.
Everybody else. They're not more powerful than everybody else. Jennifer.
Is the League of Augsburg the same thing as the Grand Alliance?
No, the Grand Alliance was from the war in Holland, the war against Holland, if I remember correctly.
Okay, but like, did the Grand Alliance involve like the same people?
Oh, no, the Swedes and England were not in the war against Holland.
Okay.
At least, I guess I should put it this way. I've never heard the War of the League of Augsburg called the Grand Alliance. They were the League of Augsburg.
Okay.
So, all right, so this is balance of power politics. This is big time. And now we get to the War of Spanish Succession. Okay, 1701 to 13. So again, you can see that basically Louis' entire reign was war.
4-year break.
He did take a 4-year break. He was tired. He was resting. The War of Spanish Succession. Essentially, what happened, the Spanish king was dying without an heir. And basically, on his deathbed, he changed his will and left the kingdom of Spain to the Bourbon dynasty, to Louis. By the way, what's the king of Spain's last name? Habsburg. He's leaving it to a French king. This is kind of a big deal, isn't it? So what question should you be asking me right now? Why? Okay. What was Spain's position in Europe at this point? No, I disagree. They were big. I guess maybe I should ask this, because you could debate that point. Which direction is Spain's arrow pointing right now? Down. Okay, I guess you could still debate that Spain is one of the top dogs. I'm in France right now. But Spain's arrow is pointed down. And the king of Spain knew it. And there were a lot of people, not a lot of people, but there was enough people that convinced him that the best way for Spain to survive was to ally itself, was to be closely linked with the dominant up-and-comer, which was France. And so that was why he changed his will. Now, the countries involved, or I'm sorry, I skipped a part here. When the war began, or just getting ahead of myself, I'm sorry, edit that out. When the will was changed and when the king died, a famous phrase at the time was, the Pyrenees no longer exist. Explain why this phrase would be relevant at this time. The Pyrenees no longer exist. With your partner, go ahead.
Well, the Pyrenees were the mountains that separated France from Spain. They had this natural war. And so with them right now, they don't really, separate
So there's no separation here.
Excuse me. I'm okay. Now, the countries involved in the War of Spanish Succession. I want you to write these down because you're going to make you're going to have two comments about each of them. France, obviously. Spain, not just a clever name. Holy Roman Empire. The Dutch. England. And then Brandenburg and Savoy. You can put those two together. Brandenburg and Savoy. S-A-V-O-Y. With your partner, figure out what the goals of each of those places were going into the War of Spanish Succession. Okay? Go ahead.
I'm guessing they all wanted to be Spain.
And they're like, we gotta keep you in check. You have secure Spain.
England.
I'm going to guess that the Dutch probably are also going to bounce
Who got Brandenburg and Savoy? Who thinks they got what their goals were? Their collective goals, because they're both pretty much the same. Yep, please do. Well, they're both independent, but you're on the right track. So they're already independent. But why would these small, seemingly insignificant states want to get involved in this big, major European war? You actually are on the right track.
Like make a name for themselves?
That's exactly it. They wanted to be recognized, make a name for themselves. That's a very good way of putting it. Now, as far as the war goes, we're not going to talk too much about it. The only thing that I would note, which your textbook doesn't, is that some historians consider this the first modern war. Not all historians do, but a significant bunch of them. Some historians argue that the 30 Years' War, some argue that the 7 Years' War, which happens later this century. Some argue that the first modern war wasn't until the Napoleonic conflict. But just so you know that some do consider this. So now, the war ends now, and what's the name of the treaty that ends the war? The Peace of Utrecht. That's how you say it, okay? The Peace of Utrecht. Everybody go ahead, try it. The Peace of Utrecht. That was pretty good, okay? Now, I want to go through, that hurts actually a lot to say that. I'm glad I don't have to say it 5 different times today. Spain basically stays separate but the same person can never be on the throne of France and Spain. It is a Bourbon that's put on the throne, by the way. It's Louis's grandson that's put on the throne in Spain. But it can't ever be the same person. It can't be the King of Spain and France. France is greatly hurt by this war. Cost them a lot of money, cost them a lot of men. It's going to severely disrupt their finances, which we'll take a closer look at in a little bit. The Dutch get security. They are safe from the French threat and from the Habsburgs. But the Dutch are never again a major player. This is kind of the final sunset for the Dutch. They're safe, they're secure, but they're irrelevant from here on out. Who knows what happens to Brandenburg and Savoy? They transform. They metamorphose. They came into this to make a name for themselves. What names do they come out of this with? What's that? Nope. Say again? Brandenburg becomes the Kingdom of Prussia, which is a seemingly useless bit of information that's going to come into play later. Savoy becomes the Kingdom of Sardinia, which is also going to come into play later. So these small states that really were not that relevant before got in, got on the right side, and earned recognition, becoming the Kingdom of Prussia and the Kingdom of Sardinia. Who is the big winner? Who comes out of the War of Spanish Succession as the big winner? England does. England emerges as the big winner. Few reasons. They get some Mediterranean holdings, one of which they still hold, by the way. Gibraltar. Still pisses off both Spain and Morocco that the English hold on to that. Which to me is just kind of amusing. But I don't live in either Spain or Morocco. They added some American holdings. The English are also thrilled that Belgium is no longer under threat, no longer threatened by Holy Roman Empire or by France. England's always worried about this corner of Europe because it's the closest to them. And so the fact that it is no longer threatened is a big deal to them. And lastly, the English got the Spanish asiento. A-S-I-E-N-T-O. This was not in your reading. A-S-I-E-N-T-O. Asiento. This is an exclusive contract to supply the Spanish New World with all of its slaves. So the English got this contract. They are the only ships that can bring over slaves to the Spanish New World. They become the UPS of human trafficking. And you know what's really terrible? This is one of the things that propels England to its place in dominance because of the financial independence they're able to secure because of this asiento. So if you wanted to make a really, really sad argument, the Industrial Revolution and the entire British Empire was built entirely on the back of the slave trade. Sorry, Lewis. But let's also remember the first country to abolish slavery was England, and then they abolished the slave trade. The first country to abolish the slave trade, and they were really the leaders in abolition also, so we can't say everything is just horrible about them. So England emerges as the dominant, not as the dominant, England emerges as the big winner of the War of Spanish Succession. Okay? Question so far. Louis' wars, 9? Sorry, no? All right, I want to talk about French finances then. We're going to start by looking at the first two charts that are up on top here. Oh, that was close to you. Hold your eye up. We just got you back from the brain, done blinded. All right, with your partner. Why is your water carbonated?
No, it just froze.
Oh, it's just frozen.
Yeah.
I was like, it's just water. Why are there bubbles? All right, using the first two charts, I want you to discuss with your partner what conclusions you can draw from those two charts. And don't just say, France went into more debt. No kidding. Okay? See what you can figure out from those first two charts. Go right ahead with your partner, jot down your conclusions that you can make.
More war began. Yeah. So, okay.
Not good.
Lose wars.
They were very costly to France.
Watch it though, Louis.
And they cost a ton of money, and they didn't even really gain anything in the end. They just hurt their economy.
Well, I mean, they're maintaining an army even during it.
Yeah, when you fought wars, you got a lot more people. I'm guessing this.
That's it? Okay. Then what did we come up with? We obviously broke these down pretty darn quick. What did you guys come up with? Sinead, what's something?
I said, because of the increasing debt, they obviously weren't able to repay the debt from previous wars, like before they got into another war.
So it just kept mounting? Good, that's a good one.
Well, off the second chart with the French military, like even during peace, he still established an army. So just in case there was going to be another war, would really happen during his time of reign, like they had enough manpower to, like, who were enlisted to fight against.
What is that going to do to your debt? You're still paying for an army during peacetime, right? Yeah. What else we come up with? Jacob, what did you guys talk about back there?
We talked about how, like, as the wars went more later and later on, like, took more drastic measures to make an army, and this clearly contributed to the rising debt in France as he went from having a 230,000 person army to a 630,000 person army.
And I think I'm sorry, finish. I didn't mean to cut you off. And having that large army was after having an army before and after having an army before. So I like how you point out it gets harder and harder to get all these people. Anything else? Yeah, Kyle, thank you.
Well, as the wars like go on and the debt sort of rises as the wars like rage on, it doesn't just as soon as the war starts the debt like shoots up.
Right.
It goes as the war gets more in play. Like from 1708 to 1715, they had $1.5 trillion in debt or whatever.
Livres.
Yeah. But and then so it was like sort of halfway through the War of Spanish Succession.
It's not just like at the outset of a conflict, like you're buying the war or something, the costs mount. Good. Now, take a look at this second chart here. Okay? This second chart, the third chart, I apologize, the third one down at the bottom, is a chart of the stock prices of the Mississippi Company. Now, you actually read a brief blurb on the Mississippi Company when you read your South Sea Company. Okay, do you remember the South Sea Company from England, the bubble? Okay, was it a state-owned company, the South Sea Company, the English one? No, it was a private charter, right? But it was a private company, but it was given a government charter. And when the English South Sea Company would belly up, what did the English government do? Who remembers?
They took
They took on the debt. They assumed the debt. They said, we're good for it. Okay? They said, we're good for it. We'll take it on. Well, the French have a similar issue. They have the Mississippi Company. Okay? The difference is, well, there's a couple differences. One, the man who set up the Mississippi Company and the man who is in charge of French finances is a guy by the name of John Law. John Law was a Scotsman who was a professional gambler. He's convicted of murder and escaped from jail. Made his way to France and somehow talked his way into the same position that a couple years earlier Jean-Baptiste Colbert had held. You gotta love 17th century politics. Like, this is the only time that could happen. Like, he goes in for a job interview and he's like, oh, my friends. And he gets the job.
What was on his resume?
Yeah, I don't know, escaped from jail. I don't know. How do you smooth talk that? That's it. Never convicted. Anyway, so John Law sets up this Mississippi Company. But then the French government gives him even more power. The French government gives him the right to print money. Gives this Mississippi Company the right to print money. And so then he pegs the cost of the stock to the money that they're printing. And this works great for a while, because look at the value, look at how it goes up, look at how it goes up, look at how it goes up. And then, just like in England, what does somebody realize? It's not necessarily fake. Why? It's going to pop. How come? What do they realize it is? It's artificially high. It's overvalued. And then people start selling. And once people start selling, everybody else tries to start selling. And then the bubble pops. And the stock prices crash. Stock prices crash. Get there. Okay? Now, England, like Kyle just said, assumed the debt. France says, oh man, that sucks. Sorry. That was a really bad idea. We totally shouldn't have done that. Good luck. And you can make an argument that part of the reason they couldn't assume the debt is because of the first chart you looked at, right? They already had a bit of debt that they had taken on in the previous decades. And they really couldn't. Now, I'm not saying this causes France and England to go in two different directions. But I don't think it's a coincidence that we're going to see England take off from this point on and France stagnate and fall into revolution. I think you could draw some direct parallels.
Where does the country fall when it comes to
Usually its own citizens. It sells bonds, or it borrows money from citizens, or it borrows money from banks, or it borrows money from other countries. So like if you sell a bond today, if I buy a $100 bond, I give the government $50 cash, and they tell me in 10 years I can get $100 out. So I'm loaning them $100.
That could be on like a much larger scale.
Yeah, oh yes, on a huge scale. Okay? One last thing I want to take a look at. What is the art style of absolutism? Close. Closely related. We already learned about it once. Baroque. You're exactly right, though, man. It's like the French. La, 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 la. I want to take a quick look at, we looked at this one time already, the Baroque PowerPoint here. Would one of you mind hitting the lights? Okay. So, the art of the Baroque. We already looked at this one time. Very dramatic, very bold colors. Okay, Bernini is the big sculptor of the Baroque. He did St. Peter's Basilica. Did some statues in there as well. These are other Berninis. They're very dramatic. They're really cool to look at. That's marble. Blows my mind. Baroque furniture, very grand, again, lavish, ornate. And then we have Dutch Baroque. Rembrandt is the big name you're going to want to remember from that. They're not Catholic, so theirs is going to look different. It looks very, well, Dutch, Protestant. And then just Baroque architecture, once again, Versailles being the best example, St. Peter's Basilica, just some dramatic stuff there. So I'm going to give out your homework now, and then we will pretty much wrap up. And to 7th and 8th period, if you have any questions, jot them down, and we'll make sure to get to them on Thursday. Hasta.
Say your seeds to horrible children.
Good job.